I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Now, while the LA Innocence Project is different to the National Innocence Project, I do think it's worth noting how these Innocence Project systems go about their work. So if we think about the Innocence Project, the national one, as of 2021, they had overturned over 300 convictions. How do they do it? Well, typically they focus on DNA to pursue exonerations. Now, probably the LA Innocence Project is probably going to be doing the same thing. It's likely that DNA will be central to how they try to get Scott Peterson, now 51 years old, off the hook for a crime he committed 22 years ago. Admittedly, there was very, very little, almost zero direct evidence of Lacey herself. Some of the best evidence in the Scott Peterson case was the smell of bleach in the kitchen, a mop and a bucket. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind I've written a trilogy of books on the Scott Peterson case. I know it quite well. If you'd like me to do a similar thing to what I did in the Chris Watts case, that body language, statement analysis, micro-expressions, the old sermon on the porch thing with Scott Peterson, let me know in the comments. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, probably the defense strategy will be continuation of the previous one, implying that some stranger, some intruder or burglar was involved because of some unknown DNA found at the scene. According to the New York Post, quote, during the initial trial, Scott Peterson's attorney, Mark Garagos, claimed a burglary near the couple's Modesto residence around the time of Lacey Peterson's disappearance may have been connected to her death. Scott Peterson's attorneys are now requesting items from the burglary investigation to help exonerate the convicted killer. Now, all I can think that means is they want the items, test those for DNA, and then compared to DNA found in the Peterson home. The Modesto Police Department are already saying that they've investigated this whole thing. They've cleared the individuals who were involved in that burglary. Well, another way to pursue the case is to forget about the cleared individuals and just look for foreign DNA. It worked in the Amanda Knox case, the whole DNA narrative. It worked kinda in the Ramsey and the McCann cases. I mean, the idea that because you can't prove a suspect's DNA is present, or even a victim's DNA is present, well, suddenly, poof, the suspect disappears and the case disappears. DNA, as we saw in the Caitlin Armstrong case, and as we are seeing right now in the Fotis Doulos case, is an important aspect that can potentially place someone at the scene, but it needs to be used along with a mosaic of other evidence, circumstantial, forensic, digital, testimonial, financial, all these other kinds of evidence, and it needs to form part of that, not something that trumps everything else. So a case should not be reduced to a single evidence item, like DNA, as occurred in the Knox, Ramsey, and McCann cases. And then because that one evidence item, right, that doesn't meet a particular burden, there's not enough of it, well, then you throw the whole case out. You throw the baby out with the bathwater. The DNA myth is similar to the myth that without a body, there can't be a crime. You know, that DNA trumps all. We see in the Doulos case that there can be a lot of evidence and the absence of evidence that can point to a crime. During Scott Peterson's trial, a legal narrative I was about to write a book about once upon a time, well, his defense made the following arguments. 1. that there was an absence of direct evidence and instead a laser focus on Scott. And this was quite a strong argument, perhaps their strongest argument, because there was an absence of, there was very little direct evidence. And there was also kind of a laser focus on Scott Peterson. 2. Scott Peterson had an alibi. He'd gone fishing. Well, this is a weaker aspect to his defense because actually, no, he didn't seem to catch anything. He didn't really seem to be fishing. And he didn't seem to be out there for very long either. Also, who goes fishing on Christmas Eve? Number 3, Scott wanted a baby and didn't have a financial motive. This is the third defense aspect fielded by Scott Peterson's attorneys. Well, this is weaker still. I'm not 100% sure about the first part. There seems to be some indication that he didn't want a baby. And from what I researched, he very clearly had a financial motive. Lacey inherited money and jewelry from a relative shortly before she was murdered. Some of these items seem to go on to eBay around about the same time as well. Notably a diamond-encrusted watch. Number 4, defense admits Scott is an adulterer, but not a murderer. Adultery and murder do go hand in hand, often. We've seen it so often in true crime. There are so many murderers in true crime that are associated with adultery or just cheating. Chris Watts is a classic. Fotis Doulos is another recent example. Laurie Vallow and Shade Bell, another example. We're still waiting for the Suzanne Morphew case to be prosecuted to find out if we can add that one to the list. Now, according to the Innocence Project, again, this is the national project, not the LA Innocence Project, which is different. But according to the National Innocence Project, of all the cases taken on, about 43% of clients were proven innocent, 42% were confirmed guilty, and evidence was inconclusive and not probative in 15% of cases. In terms of that particular group, famous cases included Stephen Avery. Avery was actually found innocent in 2003 using DNA, only to promptly commit murder 2 years later. Although it may seem unlikely that the Innocence Project might win an exoneration for Scott Peterson, organizations like this have had some success in the past. Remember, the national body, I think at various times, supported Damien Eccles and Amanda Knox. So yes, stranger things have happened. I'm not going to take it further than that. As I said earlier, if you'd like me to do a body language analysis of Scott Peterson speaking on camera, let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.